these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Well, I'll tell you what, it does relate to, we can talk about on the show we can talk about the Michigan thing. Because, Michigan, when they talk about climate change, Michigan has had record crop yields and they are dumping more cherries. That's the cherry capital of the world. They're dumping more cherries than ever before. And cherries are a really persnickety crop. So when they say climate, it's not global warming, it's climate change because of extreme colds and extreme heat. Here's what cherries need. Cherries need a moderate winter and a long, slow thaw. So in other words, it has to be as even-keeled as possible, or the cherries, because they're little bastards, they'll freeze over and they die. We had that about 8 years ago. If there's even a frost after it warms up. So you need a long, moderately slow thawing winter, and they have record cherry crops and record highs in the Great Lakes. And no one talks about it.
I mean, honestly, I think we're already recording, so we might as well just start the recording from your strange rant on cherries, because that's a great introduction to who Steven Crowder is. But Steven Crowder, everybody, this is the kind of guy you are. I mean, well-versed on a variety of subjects. I mean, maybe I'll introduce you as a farmer, a comedian, a political activist, Blaze TV host. Before Blaze TV, you had your own Louder with Crowder, podcast, a YouTube show, all of it. So, and I've been on your show a number of times, and now you're on mine, and we're going to talk about a number of things. Michigan, for sure. You've got speaking of political activism, you've got something coming up on that. But hey, great to have you, Steven. It's always fun talking to you.
Thank you for having me. And back on the cherry note.
Okay, let's get back to the important stuff.
Do we not have homeless people in this country? Like, they're dumping cherries to fix the prices. It's insane to me. Did you know how much milk they dump every week just to make sure that the prices stay at a certain rate? Like, this is one of those things where when they talk about conservatives not caring about, like, we believe that the market, free enterprise, should function. Why are we dumping cherries in milk? Just send it to the soup kitchens. Make sure you have enough bathrooms available, but we shouldn't be throwing out these crops that are extremely expensive overseas. Michigan cherry, just study it, and then you won't buy into the fear-mongering of climate change. Not saying the climate doesn't change, but the idea that if climate change is as bad as they say, and we have record highs in the Great Lakes, the most important fresh body of water in the world, and by the way, record highs with Nestle still pulling out billions and billions of gallons, which they didn't used to do, but also the best crop yields in decades. Well, then I guess sign me up.
Yeah, no, it is an interesting thing when you actually delve in. Once you get past the whole premise of it, which is what really gets people fired up. Like, hey, is it real? Yes, it's real. Got it. Okay, let's move past that and talk about what it means to be real. It means the Earth is getting much greener. It's not just crop yields in Michigan. It's all over the place. By the way, plants need carbon dioxide, as it turns out. And then we talk about what are the actual bad effects that happen, and how do you weigh that against actually some of the good effects, and then more importantly, what the heck do you do about it? But this podcast is not about what to do.
God forbid Texas become more livable as it has for the past 2 years, where we didn't have any snow, where all the morons who don't know how to drive on ice here, they have to create some witch's concoction of vinegar and virgin tears to get frost off their windshield in Texas because they just can't handle it. But we haven't had any serious ices in the last 2 years, and it's been really moderate this September. Usually you have the hottest days. Sometimes it's September. So it's like, listen, anecdotal, sure. We're not scientists. I know we'll be lambasted for that. Okay, got it. I'm just saying, you know what? I'll take the W.
It has been cooler. Where are you in Texas?
Undisclosed, and don't try. I know you're going to use your special forces acumen there to try and figure out where I am, but it's not that hard. But Texas.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah, you don't want anybody to find you. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But you won't be in Texas this weekend. So, what is it you guys are doing in Michigan?
Well, listen, yeah, and I appreciate the introduction. I don't consider this is the first time I've ever done really any kind of activism, I guess, for lack of a better word. I'm a comedian. That's what I am. That's what I've always been. I was doing clubs as a youngin' in film and television, and kind of came into this kicking and screaming. But I was born in Detroit, so I am a Michigander. Then I was raised in Montreal. I apologized, and then I lived in Michigan again for many years. It really is the most beautiful state in the union. I mean, we have more coastline than California. A lot of people don't realize, and we have
a lot of lakes.
A lot of lakes, no sharks. And if you look at like sort of, the upper peninsula or places like Leelanau County has been voted most beautiful, the national park there, Sleeping Bear Dunes, most beautiful national park several years running. It is gorgeous. It looks like the Mediterranean. You have these wineries, just rolling hills down into this beautiful crystal clear water. It's an unbelievable state that has been borderline destroyed by an authoritarian governor there, Whitmer, and this has been done under the guise of COVID. And one thing, what do you prefer, Mr. Crenshaw? Do you prefer esteemed sitting member of government? What's it, doctor?
A doctor would be nice.
Okay, doctor, that goes well. So in Michigan. This idea, well, first, let me set this. I appreciate this about you, Mr. Crenshaw. Is we both have said, listen, it's not that nobody cares. I assume that people on the left care. I think they're wrong about solutions. And I think it's important that conservatives, Republicans let people know, hey, listen, of course we care about people in the COVID crisis, but we care about saving lives as well as livelihoods. Now, let me kind of give, before we get to Michigan, which is going to be on Friday, October 2nd at the Capitol in Lansing on the Capitol steps, nationally, if you want to protect the most vulnerable, namely old people and the sick, you don't quarantine the healthy indefinitely, because what happens, listen, let me ask you, is an 80-year-old any safer? If let's say we had a complete lockdown, you were able to make sure that nobody left the house without a mask and without hand sanitizer and people were locked in place, would it be any safer 4 months from now for an 80-year-old to wander out? No, it would not. What you need to do is quarantine the sick, protect the most vulnerable so that this virus can run its course with people who are not at risk. You can't just hope that it goes away by people staying locked in place. One person gets out, it's going to be a problem. Now let's take that to Michigan. Michigan is even worse than that, because Michigan did the exact opposite of what you need to do to protect the most vulnerable. Not only did they lock down the entire state, not only did they not protect the most vulnerable with old people, but they actually, Governor Whitmer, Wuhan Whitmer, her policy, she enacted policies that forced nursing homes, assisted living facilities to take sick COVID patients. And let me be clear, it's not even like New York. Okay. In New York, you had them, you have to take back COVID patients if they go to the hospital. No. Young 20-year-olds with COVID were being sent into nursing homes and adult foster homes that were not equipped to deal with them. How do I know they're not equipped? Because a medical professional said, Governor Whitmer, we can't do this. We are not equipped. And they have never, ever released the accurate numbers as to the death toll in Michigan. They released a phony one saying 34%. It's not even close. It's a lie. And there are these signs all over Michigan that say, thank you, Governor Whitmer, for keeping us safe. No, Governor Whitmer enacted policy that ran through seniors in Michigan like a buzzsaw, and people need answers. We want to find common ground? Let's find common ground first on the truth. What are the numbers? And she won't release them.
So, did you just say people in their 20s would be put into nursing homes? Why
Yes,
was
that's correct.
Why was that a policy?
Okay. It's a policy, and there was a Republican policy that was then proposed that she vetoed. So let me just sort of go through the quick legislative, sort of history here. The most important thing that you need to know is, here's the end point. Republicans said, hey, this is really bad. We would like to propose a bill where you no longer send sick people. Three things in this bill: sick people into nursing homes, regardless of age, where you no longer send the mentally ill into nursing homes, because there was that viral video of the young black man beating the 85-year-old man who eventually committed suicide through starving himself. That young man was a paranoid schizophrenic, according to his father, and he was put in a nursing home because he had COVID. So you can go and watch that video, and it's heartbreaking. And then there was a third demand from Republicans that was, and if you're going to send anyone into nursing homes at all from hospitals, that you need to quarantine them in a separate building. And Governor Whitmer vetoed it. She said, this is playing political football. This would act as though we don't have the systems in place to protect people in these homes. No, you don't. You don't. And the people who work in those homes said that you did not have the protections in place. Yes, it's correct. It sounds crazy. Sounds crazy. Why would you send a 22-year-old, a 25-year-old with COVID into a nursing home? She hasn't really said why, Wuhan Whitmer, but here's what it comes down to, in my opinion, because we know what the policy is. We don't know why. She's saying, well, I did it to protect the most vulnerable. And of course, that doesn't really compute. Remember when this started? The main concern was we had to ensure that we flattened the curve. So at that point, what they had to do is make sure, especially if they're running for national election, which is very likely for Governor Whitmer, right? She was issuing the response to the State of the Union address, I believe, after only, what was it, like a half hour in office. They had to flatten the curve. So if a governor wants to say, I've done a good job, at this point, no one was paying attention to anything else. And people weren't really paying attention to the science. Let's be honest at this point. The accurate science that told us that older people were far more at risk and young people were actually really not at risk, or is very comparable to the common flu for young people. So they said, we need to flatten the curve. And they did that in Michigan successfully. I have relatives who are nurses who've been laid off or have been furloughed. I have a 97-year-old grandma who couldn't get procedures done because they were considered elective. She's 97. At that point, no procedure is elective if you want her to live another day. So Governor Whitmer gets to say, I flatten the curve, toss them in the old folks home, toss them in the nursing home or assisted living facilities or the homes for the aged or the adult foster care homes. Toss them there because 25% of any deaths in any given week, any given month, come from nursing homes. So at that point, people were paying attention to hospitals and the capacity. They weren't paying attention to nursing homes. And that's the only justification that I can think of, because she hasn't really offered one, and she has not offered any actual numbers. It's very important to note here, everyone talks about New York. Everyone talks about these policies it's worse in Michigan, and we have less data available. Anywhere we have the data available, I think Pennsylvania, they've done a pretty good roundup of the numbers. 68% of all their deaths came from these, senior living homes. In Canada, it was 80%. And in Michigan, the governor tried to claim 34%, which is an absolute bull-faced lie.
Yeah. Yeah, you're saying there's just no way that's possible.
No, I have some numbers. We have some requests out. But here's the thing. So 34% of deaths, and I don't want to get super nerdy, but you're a nerd. You're a nerd who can lift a lot of weight, as am I, Mr. Crenshaw, too. So I'm pretty nerdy with this, but we have some requests, which I would actually, I would defer to you. Governor Whitmer says she doesn't have to answer these requests for information during a pandemic, that it's not required, which I'm not aware of as a law. I know that we have a Freedom of Information Act, right, nationally, and there are effectively similar versions of this in states, but she hasn't answered them. We've reached out to medical professionals. If you compare Michigan to Indiana, Illinois, which is what she's trying to say, those states have a 30-something% death rate from, these senior living homes too. Well, here's the big difference. Those states are tallying up 34% of their deaths in a state like Indiana or Illinois. It includes nursing homes, it includes assisted living homes, it includes homes for the aged and adult foster homes. These are all different kinds of homes. In Michigan, all of the above are licensed with the exception of assisted living. So there's a database of the homes that are licensed, okay? The number of 34% doesn't come from all of those homes. It doesn't even come from all the nursing homes. It comes from 442 homes in Michigan right now. The number that was released, she said 34% of deaths came from senior living homes. No, 34% of deaths come from 442 homes. You want to take a guess as to how many senior living homes in those categories that I just named for you exist licensed on the Michigan database right now?
Well, a lot more than 442.
Over 4,000.
Yeah. So
over 4,000. Okay. So you have to believe that in all of it, in these other bases, it's like 4,200 something. And again, I'm trying to verify these numbers, which I will have Friday at the rally, at least as close as I can get with the transparency of the given government. You have to believe that there was not a single death in 90-something% of these other homes. Not one. It was so crazy that I actually thought, well, maybe they just did this sort of 442 homes, as a sample study, like they did a lot with polls, right? And extrapolate. Nope. 34% of all deaths in Michigan come from only 442 homes. And when you say, oh, what happened with the other homes, Governor Whitmer? I don't have to tell you that. Why? Because you're a stranger.
Yeah. You're stranger danger. No, and this is important because so I want to say a couple of things. One, my grandmother lives in a senior assisted home in Michigan, just outside of Detroit. My mom's side of the family is from just outside Detroit. My granddad was worked at Ford his entire life until he retired, and so my dad's side of the family is all from Texas, and my mom's side's from Michigan. My parents met at Texas A&M, and then my mom chose to be a Texan, as most good people should, as you have as well.
There was a point where it made sense to go to the Paris of the Midwest, and then, it made sense to become a Texan. So good on your family. They made the right choice.
But to a broader point about, what makes the most sense, universal lockdowns, who you should protect and when you should protect the vulnerable. And like you said, we have it's such a gross accusation that the left makes that, we just care the most, and that's why you don't agree with us. And this isn't unique to COVID. They do this on literally every single topic, right? You're not as extreme as we are because you just don't care, not because you're smarter and care about better governance and actually do a cost benefit analysis and understand that there's trade-offs within a given policy. No, none of that could be true. You just don't care. And so but there's actually research. I was looking for it while you were talking because you reminded me of it. But there's a paper at Epsilon, it's a quantitative research paper written by some folks, and the findings are interesting, counterintuitive, but also they make some logical sense. And there's an argument to be made that with universal lockdowns over shelter in place over a long period of time, what does this fundamentally do? I mean, it delays the spread. It delays the spread. It cannot be stopped. The area under the curve never really changes, but it delays it. And there's purpose in delaying it. Nobody would deny that. It keeps our hospitals from being overwhelmed. That was the only real reason we ever did it. But here's what it also does. It keeps the virus around a lot longer.
Right.
And when the virus is around a lot longer, the chances of a vulnerable person getting it eventually do increase.
Yep.
You cannot deny this fact, and we have not thought about that enough. We have not considered that in this broader policy making. And so, when we look at these states that were virtue signaling like crazy, moralizing over anybody who would disagree with them, that the only way that you could possibly care about somebody was to shut down their business, shut down everything, and it's just like that is scientifically not true. And it doesn't take into account any of the enormous costs on people's lives that happen.
Right.
So I mean,
and you take that, and then you add on top of it, as you're locking down the entire state, sending in young, sick patients into these senior living homes. It defies logic and reason. But again, it must be really nice to be a Democrat governor right now because there's no expectation of accountability.
Right. No, you're forgiven for everything as long as you express empathy in the largest way. One thing that's frustrated me about the leadership style that we've seen throughout the pandemic and is this. I call it reflective leadership. So you're reflecting the emotions of people. If somebody's scared, you say you should be scared. In fact, you should be even more scared than you really are. And this creates sort of this sense of empathy, this sense of emotional connection with people.
Right.
Now, that's not leadership, that's manipulation. Leadership is saying, look, I understand you feel this way, but here are the facts, and like this is where we need to get to, right? That's formational leadership, let's call it. Mm-hmm. And and like in the middle of a bad situation in the military, the last thing I would do is say, guys, we're in a disaster right now. No, you say, look, we're going to get through this together. Like that's leadership, right?
Right.
It's not diminishing the effects of the virus. It's saying like, look, here are the facts, and here's where we need to go.
Right.
That's real leadership, not just telling people what they want to hear.
No, but that's leadership that requires action. That requires action as a leader, because a leader is, what are they supposed to do? Lead, which means you have to make a decision. What you're talking about, and you see this from Governor Whitmer, and you see it from people like Cuomo. It's a psychology term, right? Some people call it mirroring or reflection, where they just mirror your emotions, so you feel heard. You're right. That is how it works, right? And Governor Whitmer goes, "You're scared? Oh, okay. I'll make sure people are really scared. Lock down the whole state."
Right.
And then, it is one of those things. We are still waiting on some of this information here. And we have the actual policy. We have the numbers she's provided. We have the licensed care providers that have not been included. We have her vetoing a Republican bill. What we do not have are actual numbers and an explanation. And for the only leg she has to stand on in this state is that she kept our citizens safe. Those are the road signs that you see right in every yard. Thank you, Governor Whitmer, for keeping our citizens safe. So we actually have thousands of yard signs printed out related to the Whitmer death toll there in the state, where hopefully we can put some pressure on her just to get her to answer. And this is something, when people talk about common ground, I think there's this, it's sort of conflated with this idea of centrism. And I'm not a centrist at all. I'm not a centrist. People would consider me far right. I'm really libertarian conservative, but conservative. And I don't run away from that, because when someone says libertarian, it's like, okay, well, Greg Gutfeld, Glenn Beck, and Bill Maher at one point were all sort of labeled libertarian. What does that really mean? So I just say conservative, but we can find common ground on the truth. In other words, every single person, whether you're a Whitmer supporter, whether you're a Trump supporter, whether you're a moderate Democrat, a moderate Republican, or you're one of those fence-sitting pansies somewhere in between, everyone should find common ground, not on the solutions, because maybe when we get the number, people will say we should still lock down the entire state until we have a vaccine, like Bill Gates, or maybe some people will say, well, you know what, we should just open up the state and let people have their own freedoms. But it all has to start with everybody demanding, hey, you know what? We should get these numbers. We should know how many people were killed as a result of your policy. And she's so busy right now with the optics telling, she's demanding an investigation into President Donald Trump. Okay, Whitmer, you first. You first.
Right. And what's infuriating about the whole, let's call it the hindsight 2020 debate, or just the general criticisms levied upon different governing officials that have had to deal with this crisis. Now, there's a proper way to lay critique upon someone. You have to be able to say, at this given point in time, given what we all knew, you went left and you should have gone right. And people told you to go right, but you went left anyway. Mm-hmm. Right. So that has to be the context. If it's not, you're just Monday morning quarterbacking. You're just using 2020 hindsight, which is not a genuine way to critique, and we can't learn anything from that. To be perfectly honest, I mean, you can learn that if you're in the exact same situation in a given date in the future, you might do it this way. But for the most part, you're not learning anything, because the context of the time and the facts at the time actually matter quite a bit. And if there was nobody else saying anything differently, then it's really not reasonable to be criticizing someone. But that's usually how, say, Joe Biden criticizes Trump. I find it to be unbelievably dishonest. And we're like, okay, Biden, well, what would you have done? Businesses would have what they need to reopen. I mean, that was his argument. That was his argument last night.
Your Joe Biden impression sounds remarkably like Mickey Rooney.
I don't know who Mickey Rooney is.
Breakfast at Tiffany's, the old Mickey Rooney. They'll have what they need. I was the #1 star in the world. I had the privilege of working with the lovely Anne Margaret. Anyway, no, but you're absolutely right. Listen, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Joe Biden, okay, when Donald Trump made a decision, we're going to ban travel from China. Joe Biden calls him a racist, a xenophobe. Okay. Do we have any specifics on anything from Joe Biden?
And that's an example of a left versus right? Like this was a fork in the road. Right. This is something we can say, no, we know you would have done something different because you said so. That's an objective criticism, right?
Yeah, no, I think that is an objective criticism. And I think it's pretty tough, for example, to use this standard, which I think is an important one, kind of what you're applying here, actually having context and sort of a decision point. We can almost compare it to, there's this film called Flash of Genius with Greg Kinnear, where there was a famous trial of the guy who invented the intermittent windshield wiper. I do recommend it to people. And they found that almost every great idea can be traced directly to a point. They call it a flash of genius. Well, they'll use it in court cases. And they sat him down. What won this man the case, I believe it was against Ford or GM, was they sat them down and said, how did you come up with the idea of the intermittent windshield wiper? Because up until this point, they just went back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And, that little pause, that was a very new invention. And the man who invented it said, I remember I was sitting and I was blinking. And I thought, I only blink when I need to, and that clears the haze in my eyes. What if a windshield wiper could work like the human eye and work intermittently? And the big auto manufacturer didn't have an answer. They just said, well, we thought it would be a better idea. And they found that every single great idea, and this is usually true of decisions, you can trace it. If you ask me when I started this show, where I got that idea, where I got the idea from Mug Club, when I knew that I was going to marry my wife. Almost anyone out there can say, oh, I remember exactly what that was. It's a lot harder to do it when you're saying, hey, Donald Trump didn't do enough, which is what Biden is saying, which is what Whitmer is saying.
Right. He just should have had more testing. Well, how would he have more testing? Well, there was a button in the Oval Office, and if you just press it, then there's all of a sudden there's more tests.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, like, it's like, no, I mean, the guys, like, let's just be honest for a second. And I guess the point I'm getting at, it's not just to rail on Biden, but it's an important thing to clarify, because when you hear Biden's criticisms at first, you know, a lot of people just sort of reactively say, yeah, you know, it could have been better. Well, no, I mean, it's not necessarily true. You have to actually explain how it could have been better in a reasonable way. But on the nursing home thing, so this is different. See, it's one thing to say that, like, hey, we wanted you to make people do more stuff. Okay. Right. So we wanted you to infringe on people's rights more by locking us down and doing all of that. That's one criticism. It is quite another to say you actually made people do something. So you took an active role in forcing somebody's behavior and actions, and this got them hurt. Right. It's quite another to say you didn't stop them from hurting themselves. That's a big difference between that and you forced them to hurt themselves. Right. So my point is, it is a valid criticism. These states that have done this with the nursing homes are truly valid criticisms, and they need to be exposed.
Especially when there have been bills proposed that have been vetoed. That's why an investigation into what Whitmer has done, what these numbers are, and why they were not disclosed, and why the numbers that were disclosed, which are verifiably dishonest, an investigation actually has an endpoint. You can say, well, hold on a second. You were the one who enforced this policy. There was a bill proposed because people were saying that this was resulting in unaccounted for death, untold deaths, and that's because largely you haven't told us. That was your decision. You could investigate that and get to a point, right? You have a premise and you have an endpoint and you have evidence that can be collected. You can't do that with Donald Trump saying, well, it could have been better. Well, okay, the things that we do know, replenishing a stockpile that had been depleted. We do know that we had governors saying they had everything they needed from the White House, that it's hard to imagine a president who was working with them hand in hand more than President Trump. Cuomo said that. Keep that in mind.
Right.
The guy with the areola barbells under his golf shirt, and let's not act like we've forgotten that. I'll never trust him as long as I live. So this is very different. This is why an investigation into Donald Trump is political theater, and the one here that I'll be calling for, and hopefully getting everybody we can at the Lansing Capitol and getting their road signs, and you'll be able to buy them. Your yard signs, and you'll be able to buy them online as well. Getting people to just put pressure on the truth being revealed. That's all I'm asking for at this point. One is political theater. Let's investigate Donald Trump because we don't think he did enough. And another is saying, hey, Governor Whitmer, I think you did too much, and I think what you did is wrong. And right now, you're lying about it. That's what I'm saying.
And we haven't even gotten to like the costs of the universal lockdowns. I talk about that plenty on my show, so I don't know that we need to get into it. Because honestly, in the time we have left, I'd like to, if you're ready to switch topics, I kind of just want to ask you about
cherries,
your general career. And I'm done with the cherries. I don't.
You ever seen them transport cherries? It's a semi truck with water, and they anyway. Go ahead.
I am kind of interested in. Okay. How do you transport the cherries?
It's like a giant truck, and it's filled with water. So you just see these floating cherries, and it sloshes off the truck. You know, every time, like the second the truck makes a wide right turn, you go, that's 18 pies.
No, there's no way that's true.
That is absolutely true.
So like the whole truck is that would so dangerous. You cannot have a truck filled with water.
No, they have to put in enough water to fill the space between the cherries, right? It's mostly cherries, but then they have to fill in that space with water to the top so the cherries don't bruise. It's it's fascinating.
They're not like just individually, like there's not like jars of cherries. Why wouldn't there be jars? Why would they be transported this way?
Because the roads in Michigan if you've driven on the roads in Michigan, you know that glass jars in a rusty truck, probably not the recipe for something you want to be selling at Whole Foods.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking though, if a truck filled with water and you take a right turn, the water starts to, it's kind of like a positive feedback loop, I think, right? In physics, just
you would think so. Over. That's how they do it. That is how they do it, and then they dump them. They dump when there are too many cherries. They dump them because they want to fix the prices. And somewhere there's a homeless guy saying, "Hey, I like cherries."
That's true. That's a good point. Okay, so besides an obsession with cherries and how they're transported and how they're dumped, and maybe after this thing this weekend, we could have like a nationwide let's get the cherries to our homeless population. Let's feed the people with
Absolutely. Cherries and milk.
I think everybody in America could get behind that. And so, but you do a lot of other things besides that. I guess here's a question. Comedy is interesting. I love the idea of comedy. I'd like to think I'm somewhat funny. Steven Spielberg once told me I was funny and I had great comedic timing, and that's really all I needed. After that, my ego was big enough to where I could basically be a comedian if I wanted to.
Yeah, because I want him as a judge on The Last Comic Standing.
Hey, whatever. Okay, you know what? He's famous and people know him, and he gave me a compliment.
Yeah, I always say is, hey, I want to laugh today. Is there a Spielberg film out?
Whatever. Okay. He happened to be there at that Saturday Night Live filming. And I was like, that's awesome. But nobody was around to hear the compliment. So this is the story. Ooh. So he tells me, he's like, oh man, you great comedic time. You could have a future in Hollywood. And I was like, that's awesome. Steven Spielberg just told me that. Nobody was around to hear it. So my wife was standing across stage, just watching the rest of the show. And so I call her over and I go, Mr. Spielberg, could you just go ahead and repeat what you just said? And he awkwardly looked at me and I was like, just do it, please. Just so my wife could hear it. And so that I could tell this story without it being just total BS. But yeah,
well, so it did. Bruckheimer on the line. I'm sure he'll have a role for you and he leans more right. So you can have him reenact it in front of your wife.
That'd be nice. But how did you get into what do you do? Do you go do you just go to a comedy club and start spitting stuff out and see what happens? How long does it take to really make it? When do you realize that hey, this is going to work? I'm actually good at this, or I'm getting better? And at what point do people sometimes just have to say, I am not that funny, and I need to stop and go do something else? Where is that moment?
Some would argue that I've reached it every night I broadcast, and listen, they won't necessarily hear an argument from me, so I understand that everyone has their own flavor. But I started was I was an extra in films, and I just got the number of a casting agent. So I was a kid. I actually started acting first. My first role, I was 12 years old, and I did a voice in this kid's show Arthur on PBS, and his friend the Brain. So Arthur's an aardvark. His friend is a bear, the Brain, and he has a pet dog. Basically hallucinogenic mushrooms in a PBS writer's breakout. But it was a pretty popular show. And what happened is I was young. There was an older kid named Luke who had done the voice of the Brain for the first few seasons. And then he aged out of it. And so I just went in and I was able to do an impression of the previous kid. That's kind of how I started off doing these impersonations. And then I was promptly fired at 13 years old. So if you ever want to know what it feels like to have your heart broken, at 13, you just walk and sorry, your voice changed, you're out. And I'm like, no, I can still do it. You're embarrassing yourself. Leave immediately. Leave the mug. So yeah, that's how I started. And then I was doing, a lot of television and film and the unions in Quebec kind of destroyed that. They slowed everything down. You used to be able to go to Montreal, and the beauty of Montreal is it's very much like Europe, and then the newer areas of the city you can make look like New York. So you can make it look like a Dickens era film in the cobblestone streets down at the old port, or you can go to St. Catherine and make it look like similar to Times Square. But then the unions,
it's really pretty up there.
It's absolutely a beautiful place to visit, not to live. With 52% income tax and and 14%
it's quite
sales
cold
tax.
too. We'd go visit. I went to college in the Northeast, so we'd visit Montreal every so often. It is cold.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh yeah, it's 40 below. It gets 40 below. We would have 40 below weeks sometimes in Montreal. So it's too cold to snow at that point. But so the unions destroyed the industry at that point, and I had been writing stand up since I was about 13, 14 years old. My mom was a wardrobe designer, costume designer and wardrobe stylist for the Just for Laughs, which is the world's biggest comedy festival. So I'd be 11 or 12 years old, and I would be able to sit in the audience at the Saint Denis Theater and as a seat filler. So what happens is anytime there are empty seats, they have people in the wings to fill the seats because it's being broadcast on television and they don't want it to look empty. And so I actually, as a kid, got to sit and watch the very set that got Ray Romano, Everybody Loves Raymond, and Kevin James, King of Queens. And I got to watch the set where Bill Burr kind of broke out and became the it comic. And the same thing with Dane Cook, and Dimitri Martin, and Jim Gaffigan. And I got to meet Dame Edna.
Whatever happened to Dane Cook?
He's still, I think he's alive.
Yeah, he was he's huge. And then I never saw another Stand up from him.
People realized it wasn't relatable. I think at a certain point, I don't want to doggy pile on pig pile on Dane Cook because I know it became popular, and the guy broke some ground for comedians there. But I got to see all of these people, and I grew up on it. And I said, hey, the industry slowed down. I never wanted to be anything other than a performer, and I just said, all right, I'll try stand up because there are no acting roles. And I'll tell you what, the worst thing that could happen happened to me my first night, in that I did really well. It was my second time doing stand-up that I just ate it hard and realized, okay, this is what this feels like. I want to swallow a knife, when you walk off stage. And it just takes a while. I will say a lot of comedians have bad work ethics, and that's kind of well known. They wake up looking for leftover drugs. And I always saw it as a means to an end. So I got into the Just for Laughs Festival at that point. I went from 1 year building the stages. So I worked manual labor building the stages. And they used to run power lines all through Montreal because, there are street, if you've ever been there during the Just for Laughs, there are street performers, like fire breathers and acrobats. And so they'd have these power lines going through the streets, and we would have to put up these kind of temporary, polymer speed bumps. So I'd be standing on the back of a truck. Okay, we'd make sure that we tape down these wires. And I was doing that 1 year. And then the next year I was performing on that stage. It was pretty surreal. And then from there, I just, it all kind of developed. And then I decided that I wanted to throw it all away by coming out of the closet as a conservative. And that kind of took me full circle, where it was actually Andrew Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart was the guy who first started posting any of my stuff in the conservative sphere. I heard him on Dennis Miller's show, which I used to have to pirate because we didn't get any conservative radio. And I just said, oh, this guy, Big Hollywood. It was before it was Breitbart, the trademark now. It was Breitbart. It was a website, bighollywood.breitbart.com, where it was really just a bunch of actors who could write. And I called him. He gave me 45 minutes on the phone. Whether you were Bill O'Reilly at that point, was at his peak, or just some kid like myself, we started posting them. And that's what sort of allowed me to, open up with who I was and have at least some kind of air support. It was really, I owe everything that's grown from Andrew Breitbart first just accepting that call. And we were friends, until the day he died.
That's awesome. Yeah, and God bless him. He's it frustrates me. Breitbart got a real bad reputation under Steve Bannon, and it frustrates me because Andrew Breitbart has nothing to do with that image,
right?
And he's a exceptional guy by all what's the word I'm looking for? Stories,
measures.
Whatever. By all measures, by all
stretches of the imagination, whatever you want. But no, he was. I don't know if you ever spent any time with him, but to know Andrew was really to love him. And I will say, kind of the thing that happened with Andrew is, and I guess to a different degree with Trump, but Andrew needed to scale back. Andrew needed to relax. Like he had some. This is why I also hate unfounded conspiracy theories, because people saying that he was killed or he was whacked. Like I knew Andrew, and Andrew had some pretty severe health scares before he passed, and he knew he had to make some changes, but he was also changing the world. I mean, think about it. This wasn't long after the the Weiner scandal, right? That Andrew was solely responsible for breaking. The media was going to consider that a walk-off, and we might even have had President Weiner at this point, if not for Andrew stealing Weiner's podium at his own press conference. And after that, he was changing the world, and everyone around him, they were pushing him, go, 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 foot on the gas. And I just wish there had been more people in his direct circles saying, hey, you know what, take some time for you.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot with people who are elite.
Is he who influenced you to start doing the change my mind things? Because, one of his tenets was, hey, go out and get into the fray. Right there at the ground level, and have the debates, be prepared, and change people's minds that way. So is that initial mentorship where that came from, or how did you come up with that?
Well, that was long after Andrew passed. I will say, because of Andrew, I got a job at a place called PJTV, and then I was at Fox News for 4.5 years. So I signed with them when I was like 21 years old, and Fox News, didn't really know what they wanted to do with me. They just knew that they didn't want CNN to have me, or MSNBC. At that point, I was just sort of being asked to appear on networks, and they would have me go on and do these debates, a few times a week, like a contributorship and exclusive thing. And I'm very grateful for my experience there. Met a lot of great people, but I also realized, okay, there's only so far you can go here with a 5-minute segment, on a Sunday morning with someone who's in a think tank. And I realized that the way people were talking on air, it's not the same goal as you would have trying to actually convince someone of your argument in person. And it actually came down to this. I was on a panel, and I think it was Lanny Davis, and it might have been Geraldo Rivera. I'm not sure. But I remember at one point I was sitting there, as a comedian, I think it was Phyllis Diller who said, I didn't learn comedy when I learned how to write. I learned comedy when I learned how to edit. So if you can tell a joke in 4 words, well, you better tell it in 4, and you better not use 8. And so I would be on Fox News on a panel, and I would try and make my point as concise and laser focused as possible. And I remember sitting there watching Lanny Davis drone on saying nothing. And afterwards, some people said, oh, yeah, that's the whole point. When you're on these panels, when you're on these shows, you want to get as much airtime as possible. So you take longer to get to the point so that when you're done with it, the person doesn't have time to respond. And I thought, wow, that's the exact opposite of what I would want to do if I wanted to convince someone of my point of view. And I realized I'm not saying that this is only Fox News. This happens on all cable television, on all legacy media, because that's by design. And so I've always tried to clarify with people, change my mind is not a debate. I've had debates on my show we've had I just forgot her name there, the noted Naomi Wolf. Had the first transgender mayor of tech. We've had plenty of debates on the show. What a change in my mind is sitting down and rationalizing your position and hopefully providing people out there watching the tools to have these kinds of discussions. And they don't always go well, but we do try. And a lot of people have changed their opinions from those segments. So it is, sort of antithetical to what you would see with my experiences in cable news. And Andrew Breitbart always believed in engaging people on the other side, which, of course, again, is antithetical to the left today. By the way, people don't realize this. Many, many years ago, when Antifa was much smaller, we did a hidden camera sting that led to arrests.
I remember that. They
handed my producer, they handed him an ice pick,
I remember
taser,
that.
and they were getting K-bar knives and sawed-off shotguns. And I remember I was calling Ben Shapiro because he was speaking in Utah that night. I said, hey, just so you know, these guys are about to hand us sawed-off shotguns. He said, they're what? I said, yeah, you better get a flak jacket. Like, all of a sudden, he was panicking. He was like, what do you think the risk is? I'm like, I'm looking at the gun. I'm looking at the knives. I'm looking at them right now. I said, your ABC reporter has no interest in reporting it. The only people who are taking it are the authorities. And then we had people, I can't say which authorities or which branch, they were going, how'd you get in here? How'd you get in their encrypted messaging app? So this happened a long time ago, and they were clearly organized. Now, if you mean it's not like the NAACP where there's one central national organization, okay. But to say that they aren't organized within different cities.
But they're not a group. Yeah, it's
totally
and it's well organized, right? Yeah, there's not like a leader. And they keep using that as to say like, well, it's basically not even real. I mean, this is the implication. And it's like
it is nothingness. Yeah, no,
it's crazy. Unfortunately, we could do this for hours, as people have heard us banter. No, but we do not have hours. Stephen, we'll have you back on another point. Because we also want to hear more about y'all's fight with YouTube and some of the behind the scenes stuff on censorship. But you'll have to wait and subscribe and listen for the next podcast, everybody. So Stephen Crowder, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you very much, sir. I always appreciate it.